all of us this time. All three of us are back on. Yay. So excited to have you guys with me here today. Oh, there it goes. It says it's streaming. Perfect. We have Jim T. Chong the Wok Star's co-host and Mike Van Pelt co-host. He is the host of the True Man podcast, as well as the founder of True Man Life Coaching. Jim T. Chong the Wok Star, publicist, karaoke extraordinaire, and so many other things that you can find on zoomturtle.com. But we'll let them explain that later on at the end. Today is something that is really anything and all things leadership, especially true leadership. Being true to yourself so you can be true to others. This topic is one that really speaks to my heart on so many levels because it's interesting. I was thinking about kids, raising kids in this. And we say this word to them so many times. And then as they get older, for a little bit, you feel like you got it figured out. Then they become teenagers and young adults, and it feels like it all goes away. And then they start doing it again. But then we start looking into leadership as in rank, title, position, being an adult, and then doing this with our kids or with other people, as in we're the example. And this word is something that honestly is a lost art in so many respects. And that word is listening. Leaders are listeners. I remember a long time ago, teenager wasn't listening. And I had an adult who was a little upset because none of us had listened. And he lost his cool, and rightfully so, by the way. we were not good in this moment. Oh my gosh, it was bad. And we didn't listen. And he just stood there and he looked at us and he said, "Boys, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a very good reason. You are to listen twice as much as you speak." And his point was he had given us very specific instructions on what we were to be doing, and we messed it up very badly, and we were screwing around a lot. And the thing is, I remembered when he said that, I looked at the group and thought, because I was actually the leader of the boys, I had that position, that rank. So, of course, all eyes fell on me because none of us were listening. We were all talking when he was talking, and he gave us the opportunity to try and fix it on our own, and we did not do our best. It's because we didn't listen. Had we listened to him, 1, we would have gotten it done twice as fast. 2, we wouldn't have gotten in trouble. And 3, we wouldn't have had to learn the lesson the hard way. And so today's topic focuses on leaders as listeners. Now, that said, if you look all the way back through everything we talked about in servant leadership, if you go all the way back to when we first started this show, talking about communication, training and development, safety and crisis, when we were talking about all those, every single one of these things centers around listening one way or another. But we just had little quips here and there. And so as I think about where we are today with leadership, I just gave a safety presentation today. And I even quoted myself, leaders are listeners. And the topic of this was safety incidents that happened that shouldn't happen had leadership listened. Somebody had their career ruined, became physically disabled the rest of their life. There was money lost. There was respect lost. When we're talking to our kids and they're not listening, things don't get done. Now mom and dad are upset, or vice versa. How many times, and no one has to actually answer this, but I'll put my hand up in the air. I've done it. How many times have our kids tried telling us something like, yeah, whatever. And you come to find out it was something important, like the toilet's overflowing.
Yeah.
So Jim, coming to you first, how important is it to you that listening is such a critical skill in life? And if you have any examples of where someone just would have just listened, how much better the scenario would have turned out?
Yeah. Well, I think, first off, did you say something, Chris?
Huh? What?
So,
a little louder.
Well, it's really important because, we all talk about, for me in our global cooperative chamber and just in life, we're all about teams, building teams. And so you cannot have coordinated effort if you don't listen. And so listening really affects everything of what we do, especially if you're in any aspect that concerns other people. So listening will help you, first off, just be accurate in whatever you want to produce. Secondly, it will help, producing the result you want. But listening is just so key to make sure that something's done the way you want it to be done, or whatever objective you're trying to achieve to be done. But secondly, I think just out of respect for people, listening does denote respect, and it says a lot about a person whether or not they listen. Are they about themselves or about other people? And so it's very key for that. For yielding an end result is so important, but also out of respect as well. So those are two things I think are really key. And so it's very important from that regard, because everything stems from that.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point in the clarity and clearness of communication. We talked last week about how leaders are communicators, having that effective communication. Now it's about the back and forth part of the communication of, yes, we speak, yes, we put out directions out there. One, they've got to be clear and concise. We covered that last week. But two, those that are out there listening to it, they're doing one of several things. They're either hearing you, and that's it. So now you're Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. Yeah, that comes up a lot with my kids, by the way. And of course, they don't know Charlie Brown as well as others would, because there's all those kinds of shows and things out there. Or something else they could be doing is actually actively listening to you and sit back and saying one of two things. Wow, Mike really heard us. Mike really listened to us. This is exactly what we were talking about. It's exactly what we wanted done and how we wanted it done. And now we're getting to implement it. Or they're saying, man, Mike didn't listen to us at all. Mike doesn't care, which, by the way, is totally opposite of Mike Van Pelt. I'll vouch for that any day.
I vouch for the fact
sake of example.
Right now,
for the sake of, that's why he wears the headphones. He makes sure. But the thing is if you are actively listening to one another, there are so many other solutions that come out of it. There's less chance of loss of reputation and respect. There's just so many applications of actually listening to somebody, actively listening to them, and being able to help solve their problems or the problems that exist, and putting the policies and procedures in place that will ensure success. And so, Mike, when we're thinking about listening as a skill, I'd like to hear your thoughts on listening for success. What does it take to be an active listener so we can have success? And it doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't have to be, we got X amount of things done today. As much as it is just people knowing that you didn't just hear them, you listened to them.
Well, I'm going to approach this from a me standpoint and what I've been working on. So can you hear somebody without opinion? Can you hear somebody without judgment? Can you hear somebody without coming up with a solution? Because if you're coming up with opinions, solutions, trying to fix, trying to solve for, your ability to active listen goes down, because now it becomes about you. Well, you know what I would do? I would take the car to the shop and I would, okay, yeah, got it. And so what I've been trying to focus more on is just listening to people and put the emotions of what we typically try to do. Because we live in a culture nowadays where everybody's got an opinion about something. I always joke. I was having a conversation with my father recently, and I said, Dad, do you remember when everybody used to talk behind your back? He goes, yeah. I'm like, now they just say it to your face. And I'm not sure. I'm not really sure which one's worse. But, we live in a time and a place where, people don't have any problem, telling you where to go, it seems like, to your face. And that's really unfortunate, because people aren't exercising good discernment. The other thing I would say about this is, and this one is a little bit more personal. I've had some hearing loss here in my adult life, unfortunately. And it's caused me to put a high value on listening, because depending on the environment I'm in, it can be really difficult for me to hear. And sometimes if it's a very loud environment, my brain just checks out. And I've had that happen even though I wear hearing aids. And so I put a very high value on hearing people these days, because I know what it feels like to not be able to hear all the time or ask people to repeat. And sometimes I just have no choice. So, God gave us 2 ears, 2 eyes, among all body parts. And so, there's a reason we have these things. There's a reason that God's gifted it to us. And so I think we really have to learn to not take that for granted.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think one of the things that I keyed on in what you were saying, this is something that it was taught to me, not necessarily in these words. So I'm by no means taking credit for coining this phrase, but what it boiled down to was listening to understand, not listening to respond.
Mm-hmm.
I look so many times at, different leaders or, maybe people in sales, and I've done it, so I'm not knocking anybody. It's just things we can all improve upon, where they're trying so hard to get the close. They're trying so hard to get the close. They're trying so hard to get the close that they don't even listen to what somebody's saying. I mean, I actually stopped somebody one time because they were my service rep for what I needed fixed. I said, this is the problem. You know what, Mr. Tice, I tell you what, if you do this, this, and this, and you add this package and you bring in this, time out. This is what needs to be done. Now, little they know that I had a slight background in what they were doing, and quite honestly, I was hitting a point of, I think I have more expertise than you, so it's time for you to walk away and I find someone else. I'm not trying to be cocky. It was just the truth. The issue was they were so set on, you need this and you need that. No, I don't. I need A. That's it. I don't need B, C, D, and E. Was not, and actually this quote destroys me when someone says it. I've done it again, so it destroys myself too. But I hear you, Mr. Tice. But you heard my voice. Congratulations. I'm a loud person, and I'm about to get a lot louder. And believe me when I say I can get loud. My voice carries very well. And he goes, what? And he finally caught on. I was getting a little agitated. I said, dude, it's your last chance before someone else is on my doorstep. This is what needs and what I want to be done, and that's it. So that gets taken care of, or walk to your car. Amy, Mr. Tice, I hear you, but I said, you know what? We're done. We're done. They lost the sale. I reached out to a few different people, said, hey, who can take care of this? And they're like, this is your guy, guaranteed. He'll show up and just get it done. Sure enough, dude walks up, Mr. Tice, what do you need? I need this and this done. He's like, consider it finished. Could have still tried to sell me 18 other packages. When he was done, he said, you know what, Mr. Tice? He goes, I heard you loud and clear. It's what you wanted done. Just want to let you know, here's other services that we offer. Perfect. Thank you very much. He listened to me because he listened to understand, not to respond. And so as business people, as managers, as servant leaders who have this skill of listening, we need to be paying attention to that, because, Jim, how can we solve problems? How can we come up with solutions if we're not listening? And it's twofold. One, are we listening for solutions that were there, or are we not listening to, or are we not listening to the problem that exists? How do we find the solution if we're not listening?
You're asking?
Yeah, you. Yeah.
It's really important. I was listening and I was waiting for that pause. Just so you know, I think it's a very deep question what you're asking, because a lot of us, Chris Rock put out this thing called selective outrage. Selective is an interesting word. Selective listening, right? We hear what we want to hear. And so it's really almost impossible to intentionally solve a problem, and notice the word intentionally, if you don't know what problem you're trying to solve. And so if I don't hear you, if I'm not listening, I really don't know what I'm trying to solve. So by default, it's just, I'm not going to say impossible. Sometimes if you roll the dice, you're going to hit the magic number still, but not very likely you're going to hit head on. And going back to my first thing, what I shared, the respect issue, you're not respecting that person as well. And so really very difficult to solve a problem if you're not listening, if not impossible.
Well, and selective hearing is such a It's such a funny term because how many married couples
Oh,
use that term with each other? And, you know, I will say this: there's times, Jim, you're hitting it right on that it's a lack of respect between each other. But there's also times where it's like, oh my gosh, I'll get it done. I hear you. I'll get it done. No, you don't understand. There is water flowing out of the sink right now. But had you
Right.
listened to me 2 weeks ago when I said it was a drip and would have fixed it right then and there, or whatever the case may be. But Mike, you know, when you think about it, especially being a true man, and I know, and ladies, I know you're on the show. I know there's ladies watching the show as well. So this can go both ways, but you know, there's 3 men as hosting this right now. Looking at being a true man and listening to our spouses and listening to our children, being the leader of the house, you know, or in the instance of what the situation is, listening is such a critical skill. And yet it's so easy, especially when it's the people closest to us, to hear their voices and go, uh-huh, uh-huh. So how do we stop that? Especially when we think about these silly things
Yeah.
right here.
How you're asking me how we stop that?
How do we stop that? How do we get better at listening?
I have a hunch if I could really answer this question, I'd be a multimillionaire. But how to listen? It really comes down to, and this takes practice. Listen, I'm gonna tell you right now, have I perfected this? No. It really comes down to being present with
Yes.
somebody and just, you know, is that person you're having a conversation with the only person in the room? In other words, is the television glaring, but your wife's talking and you're watching the television and she's talking? You know, I'm going to venture to say that a majority of the time that's the case. So if your wife's got something important to say, do you mute it? Do you turn it off? I mean, those are the things that have to happen. And honestly, in my experience, if you do that, you'll get to the root of a problem or a challenge somebody's having much quicker. And then you can turn the television on faster. No kidding. It's surprising. But if you don't hear somebody or you don't show them enough respect to listen to them, then you're going to run into problems a lot. And, you know, I think too much of the time what we're thinking about when other people are speaking is, well, what's in it for me? You know, I get this a lot, even in emails, which is another form of communication, or on social media where people are reaching out to me. They have no idea what I want, but they think I do because I'm a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get email after email after email telling me how great their stuff is. But how do you know I even want it? How do you know what I really want? You know, I got an email from a guy here a couple of weeks ago, and he said, here's what I do in a nice, pithy, quick way. And, oh, and by the way, this is how I work. It's kind of a paper for performance thing. And I'm like, now you're talking my language. And so I said, let's make an appointment. I want to know who you are. I don't need you now, but I may need you down the road. And so we did. And it was really quite that simple. He came to me. He didn't say he could solve all the world's problems. He said, yeah, basically, here's what I do. And by the way, it's pay for performance. And one of the challenges in business that I found is you expect me to take on all of the risk. And when I enter into a business relationship, I view it as 50-50. So how about you show me what you do and how well it works before I take on all the risks? I had to learn that the hard way, by the way. But I think, you know, sometimes you have to put this what's in it for me aside and just be present with somebody. Just be present and actively listen, be engaged, ask questions. You know, if you don't know what they're talking about, ask them.
And then listen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what I heard, full disclosure, Chris called me before we came on this video conference to clarify a question that I had asked him. In a matter of minutes, we had it cleared up. I mean, it was really that simple because I wasn't clear on what he was asking me, and he called me, and boom, done. And I think most conflicts arise out of a misunderstanding.
Yep.
Misunderstanding. So many things that happen to us in life are because of a misunderstanding. And that's a shame when one or two questions would have cleared something up. So I hope I answered your question. That's a tough question to answer.
It is, and it can be, but it also doesn't have to be. And Mike, you did, you answered it. If you don't understand or you didn't hear somebody correctly and you were listening, just say, hey, I just want to double check this. Sorry, I'll be 100% honest with people, or you've been talking for a while. I checked out for a second. I'm sorry. And it's nothing personal.
Yeah.
Because there are times that the brain just can only absorb so much, and all of a sudden you see a spot on the wall that needs to be cleaned, and you're like,
yeah, we're human beings. We need to cut ourselves some slack on that. I agree with you 100%.
Cut yourself some slack and there's not a person out there who hasn't done it. Period. We've been around for too long to not have messed up and made mistakes and not heard somebody correctly. And here's my thing. I kind of grew up for a while on it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Well, okay, depending on the context, I can see where it goes. Here's the worst part of all that. When you're doing that, you're making an assumption of what is to be done instead of saying, you know what, I need clarity on this. Let me ask, and maybe it's not Mike and I having that conversation. Maybe it was something handed down from someone else. And, but Mike's the direct connect to that person. Man, hey, Mike, it's not you. I heard something wrong, or I'm not sure. A quick text, an email, a phone call, whatever. And then listen to what the answer is. Write it down if you have to. That's another big thing. People don't write things down anymore. Say, oh, I can remember, or hey, it's in my phone. Just so you know, it's still 70% more effective to write things down than any other way of trying to remember. But the issue is that a lot of times, and Mike, you said it, we're looking at the what's in it for me, and then we go into me land, and we miss how it can be for everyone else because we didn't listen. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to share. See, I think you demonstrated something very important. I actually just acknowledged you. There's something in the camera or something that I communicated saying, hey, I wanted to share something. Very interesting. I didn't say, hey, let me say something. I actually was hesitating. I pulled back that. And it's right here. I actually put it in text here, okay? It says it was Albert Mehrabian, a researcher of body language, who first broke down the components of a face-to-face conversation. He found that communication is 55% nonverbal, 38% vocal, and 7% words. And, interesting. I thought to myself, you know what really speaks louder than words? Your actions. And we know that. And what are we really communicating? If I'm saying I want to hear you, and yet I'm not really spending the time, and I'm distracted. Now that, sometimes we do multiple things. We're just trained. It's a different world. We got to not be overly sensitive on that. But it's all about priorities, guys. People's time and focus will be based on the priority. We set up, somebody mentioned to me, and I had to really think about it. It probably made me think more than ever about the priority. And I had to be okay with it, saying this, because I don't like to make people feel like not important or whatever. Here's the reality. If we have a meeting here and I plan something somewhere else, it's just more important to me at that moment. Doesn't mean this meeting's not important, but at that moment, it means that that's more important to me. That's a true statement, right? By definition, right? It's not good or bad. It's what we make it. But keep in mind, we're talking about solving problems. You were talking about things. Really, nonverbal and how we act, the decisions we make will really tell how important someone is, or if we're really listening. So
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with. We talked about this a while back when it came to the open door policy. Of people want to be heard. They want to be able to tell you what's going on, but there's nothing wrong with setting up boundaries either. My kids the other day, I was on my phone. I wasn't scrolling or anything. I really was trying to handle an important message at the time.
So you say. No.
Dad, you're not listening. You're not listening. This time it's true, Jim. Be nice. Dad, you're not listening. You always tell us to listen, and you're not listening. Time out. Give me 30 seconds to finish this thing, and I promise you, I'm all yours. Just give me 30 seconds to finish this. Set up boundaries, be open and honest with people, and let them know, I do want to hear you. I do want to listen to you. This is when this is going to be able to happen. Now, that said, like I tell my kids when, I'm in meetings and things, and, if the door's closed, there's a reason. Yet somehow, some way, sometimes the door gets pounded on. Dad, we need you. Dad, we need you. What was so important right now? The Xbox is not working right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, turn it off and I'll look at it in like 3 hours. How does that sound? Versus, Dad, the house is on fire. We need to get out. That's a reason to knock on the door. Okay. So it's okay to set up boundaries because I do want to listen to you. I do want to hear you. I do want to communicate with you. I do want to solve problems with you. But we also got to make sure, yes, if it's a here and now, it's got to get done. Stop what you're doing and listen. Figure out what can be done. Decide a timeline of how it can be done. But listen so you have the proper discernment. And if it's a moment where it's not something that's just like this absolute pressing matter, then have the discernment, think through it, to have the time to get together so you can effectively and intentionally listen. It's such an important skill that all leaders must have. Doesn't mean we don't need to work on it. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect at it because we're all a work in progress. Mike said that earlier. I don't have it all figured out. But I can say this. We figured out a lot more, a lot quicker, more effectively, safely, efficiently, however you need to look at it, when we listened to each other, whether that be in business, that be in spouse, that be with kids, that be with neighbors at church, the three of us together, whatever it may be. When we listened to one another, we showed love for one another and respect, as Jim kept referring to one another, which built rapport and reputation and made us better problem solvers, which, by the way, is a leaders are thing that will come up later. Jim, final thoughts from you, and how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think this is a great thing to talk about in terms of listening. And, I think that this is a good topic. We need to evaluate, are we really spending great time to listen to people before responding? But even equally important, are we giving a message that people are listening to that they feel like it's important enough to hear?
Yeah.
So with that, you can go to zoomturtle.com, but really I've been talking about jimtchong.com. That's a digital face card that I've been using, and it's been really very well accepted in a lot of things we're doing, especially in different communities. So I'm really excited about digitalfacecard.com, but you can go to jimtchong.com and look me up. Thank you. I'll be the primary Asian on the card. Thank you.
Mike Van Pelt, final thoughts from you, and how do we get a hold of you?
I can't believe I got to follow that up. But anyway, and I have a hunch this is going to come up this weekend, Chris. Listen, I think what this comes down to is having intimate, vulnerable discussions with lots of questions and just being present that builds relationships, whether it's in your personal life or your business life. And I think that those are some of the ingredients that need to be there in order to place a value on the relationships that you're having. Otherwise, your relationships are going to fail. So you can get to my website at truemanlifecoaching.com, or you can just drop me an email at mike@truemanlifecoaching.com. And of course, the podcast is on my website. So True Man Podcast, check it out.
And it's lit up behind his head too.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I'm
Technically, it's not behind
the
And you know what, folks? That's the thing. Both Jim, Mike, as always, thank you. You guys brought it home. It is. And this word comes up a lot, is intentionality. What's the intention behind it? How many times I've been in a conversation with somebody like, oh, I didn't get that done, or I didn't understand, or I wasn't, they'll even admit, and I've said it, I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, you weren't listening. Well, I heard what you said. Really? Repeat it back to me. mean, how many of us have had a teacher say that in class? Raise your hand if you're listening. Of course, everyone hears that because they know they're in trouble, and everybody raises their hand. Okay, somebody repeat it back to me. And there may be 2 out of the 20 students or however many are in the classroom that can actually repeat it back. I usually wasn't one of them, by the way. So you gotta listen.
Yes.
You gotta listen, even if you don't think it's important, or maybe it's not. Like, I love my daughter to death. She got a little veterinarian kit, and she's got all her stuffed animals. And she's, Dad. I was like, what? She's like, you weren't listening. I was like, okay, what's wrong? She's like, she's dead. What? Who's dead? Now I'm listening, because she didn't say this. I know for a fact she didn't say this before, because it started with dad. Now I'm listening. So who's dead? She's like, I couldn't save her. Couldn't save her. Who? My unicorn. Okay, sweetheart, I hear you, and I appreciate that that's very important to you right now. It's a stuffed animal. Whereas there are other times, though, that are much more important, and we haven't listened to somebody. We heard them, we heard their voice, and we're like, did you listen to me? Like, this and this happened, and we have to fix it right now. Don't let that be you. And if it is, get clarity, get out of the confusion state, work on it, and remember, leaders are forgivers. So forgive yourself and forgive others for these things too. Be willing to work together and listen to one another. I'm Chris Tice. I founded and own Eagle Fire Enrichment, which is a leadership solutions company. Talk all things leadership, and believe you me, we talk about listening a lot. You can reach me, Chris, at eaglefireenrichment.com, or put a www in front of the eaglefireenrichment.com. You can reach me via the website. As always, Jim, Mike, such a blessing to work with you two on this show, and such knowledge. I mean, people should have been running out of ink or breaking their pencils right now, because that was a lot, and it goes deep, and it can go a lot deeper. But we only have half an hour, and we're at our time today. So everybody, have your best day ever by making every day great. Remember, you can't never did. God bless us all. We'll see you next week.
Have your best day ever.